Prime Minister Trudeau, we know that there are more than 40 countries around the world that are currently using some sort of app to help to curb the spread of COVID-19. This app is a different type of app because it's an exposure notification app. Let's start there as far as how that can help Canadians.
Well, we heard from the very beginning that different countries were developing apps, and we were really interested in how we can use technology to give people a sense of agency that they can actually do things to affect the spread of COVID-19 around them. So there was attempts to use GPS and geolocations and all sorts of different things that ended up bringing privacy concerns and really draining the batteries in other countries' apps. So we decided to take a slightly different approach, putting privacy first and keeping it anonymous, but going on contacts. So the way it works is if you actually end up close to someone for 15 minutes and then a few days later they test positive, you might have been exposed without knowing it. The app will anonymously let you know that you were exposed to someone or potentially exposed to someone who then tested positive, and maybe you should test positive as well. But it's been totally anonymized. There's no identifiers within the app for you, and you won't know who or when you might have been exposed, just that you might have been exposed. And then it's your choice whether or not you put in the information, but we encourage people to. But everything about it is voluntary. Everything about it is anonymous. And that's why it's getting such a high rating for protecting privacy and being a powerful tool.
Absolutely. Jean-Francois, just to pick up on something the Prime Minister just said as far as the privacy piece, almost every privacy expert that has reviewed the app has said the same thing. Canadians do not need to be worried about privacy. Jean-Francois, this is because it is based on Bluetooth technology, not GPS. So let's walk through how that technology works.
Yeah, correct. I think one of the interesting aspects of it is that the application does not need to know where it is. It only looks at if others that have downloaded the application are running it on their phone. And essentially, the application is broadcasting via Bluetooth anonymous codes, and they're essentially listening to one another. So when the proximity is close enough, it starts counting. And once it reaches 15 minutes, it takes a note. Oh, okay, I spent 15 minutes at less than 2 meters to that anonymous code. I'm just going to keep track of that. The application does not know who that code represents, who it is. There's no tracing of some sort. It just keeps a note of the code. Once in a while, the application then connects to servers where if for whatever reason you contracted COVID, you add a test, and then you elected to essentially report that test being positive, your anonymous codes that change from time to time will be there. And that's when each of our application, when it looks at the server, will see if that code was positive. So the whole process is anonymous. It does not keep track of where you've been because it does not know about it. And at any given time, we're making sure that the security and the safety of people is taken care of.
Prime Minister Trudeau, we're going to talk a little bit more about privacy in just a second, but let's talk about access, because we know that there are so many Canadians who want to be able to download this app right now. It's been a rollout among the provinces coming out in Ontario on July 31st. Let's talk about where we are right now in terms of that access.
Well, first of all, the app is available to be downloaded right across the country. Everyone from that July 31st date, everyone could download it. There's no barriers that way. And the app starts working as soon as you have it on your phone in the background. You don't have to do anything. However, in order for you to be able to plug in when you get a positive test and therefore notify other people anonymously that they may have been exposed to you, the local health authorities need to be able to give you an 8-digit code. So that's where the provinces needed to step up to be able to have a verifiable code. And so far, we've got all provinces, with the exception of Alberta and BC, who are working on it. But if someone from Saskatchewan or Ontario is in Alberta and BC and they, got notified, it can still work for people who are traveling. So we're really hoping to get all provinces on board. But even having as many as we have, particularly around Ontario and Quebec, where we're seeing the biggest hotspots in the country, this is a really, really powerful tool that will allow people to track things down. I mean, there's a great example in the early days of a teacher who felt just fine, randomly, or she thought, got a notification on her phone that said, "You've been exposed." She says, "What? I have no idea. I have no symptoms." She went and got tested. And yes, she was positive, which was the only thing that kept her at home instead of going into the classroom, because she had no other symptoms. So this app actually works, and it works well. Over 1,000 people across the country have plugged in a positive diagnosis. And if you imagine that each one of those people will have been exposed to a handful of people themselves, who then would be exposed to a handful of people themselves, every single time someone downloads this app, you're preventing a whole potential spread that might not happen.
Absolutely. I had a friend of mine just yesterday say, "Amber, I don't know if this app is working because it's not doing anything." And I said, "Well, that's good." You don't want to necessarily get that notification, but trust me, it's running in the background. Jean-Francois, I have a question for you going back to the privacy issue, because I was looking up what apps Canadians are using most. And unsurprisingly, those apps are TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. If you think about the information that is shared among those apps, it's much more severe in terms of privacy implications. So I want you to compare the COVID Alert app to what Canadians already have on their phones.
It's the polar opposite. It's actually hard to compare. Where a lot of these applications actually want to know everything about you, so they can personalize content and make sure that they understand your intent and everything. The COVID Alert app is the opposite. The goal for us is to really provide an additional tool to health authorities in informing, reaching out to people who may have been exposed to COVID, and making sure that we can very, very quickly direct them towards taking a test. And the whole process here is to be respectful. We understand what it means and how we can feel when we receive a diagnostic of being positive to COVID, and how people may think about it. And therefore, many, many steps have been taken to ensure that your private life, your privacy is actually respected and taken into account. And that's really something that is important. We look at phone tracing that is going on, where we're calling people, and often people are not feeling at ease to respond and talk to someone and talk about where they've been for all sorts of reasons. And we want to respect that. The application is the solution. So you can help people, you can help us fight back the COVID pandemic, and you can do that while respecting your privacy. So I think this is a very, very positive tool that we're adding to everything that we've already got in place.
And Amber, if I can jump in, it's not just about the privacy, which is super important, but it's also about empowerment of the individual. Because not only did we want to keep people private, but we also didn't want to have them forced into doing anything. I mean, we're counting on people to actually choose to plug in that they have a positive diagnosis, but that's on the user to be able to make that decision. Hopefully, if you're downloading the app, it's because you want to make sure that people know, and we can slow down the spread. But we didn't put any mandatory elements in it, so you get to make the choice of doing it. And that voluntary aspect, combined with the privacy aspect, actually has made it recognized as one of the best apps in the world. What that means, though, is that we are counting on Canadians to do the right thing. But what we saw through the spring was people want to do the right thing. People stayed home. People are wearing masks. People are being really, really thoughtful about whatever they can do to slow the spread of COVID. And what you can do is download this app, and if you get notified that you may have been exposed, get tested. And if you test positive, plug it in. But it's on the individual. You are empowered to help shape the path of COVID-19. That was really important to build into the app to make sure that as many people as possible feel comfortable about downloading it and using it.
Prime Minister Trudeau, you stole my next question, but that's okay, because I do want to dig into this a little bit further. From what I have read, it only really works well if maybe 60% of the population has downloaded the app. We know that there are lots of Canadians who maybe don't have access to newer smartphones. So let's talk a little bit about that piece of it. What number would you be happy with in terms of percentage of Canadians who have downloaded this, knowing that it would help to be even more effective than it is today?
Well, I think in the early days when people were looking at the Australia app, the Singapore apps that as I talked about earlier, weren't quite as effective as we'd like. People were saying, oh no, you need 60%, you need 70% adoption in order for it to make a difference. Other studies have come out and said, you know what, if you have only a 15% take up, which would be about 5 million people in Canada, you can actually reduce the cases by 15% and maybe even deaths by 10%. So any little bit will make a difference. And if you think about the way it works, if we prevent one person from spreading to 2 or 3 others, and then those 2 or 3 others don't spread to 3 or 4 others, you are making a difference in the path. So every single extra person who downloads it makes a real difference in the spread of the virus. But obviously, the more people that do it, the better. We're up over 4 million downloads now. I think the awareness that people are getting of the app and what it can do is really spiking up the numbers because it's something concrete that we can do. We've seen people happy to wear masks right across the country, happy now to download the app. There are well over 20 million smartphones in the country that can take this app. So there's a lot of people out there who could absolutely be doing more, particularly in this second wave where we are not shutting down and staying at home everywhere the way we were before. We're still trying to go about our daily lives. And this is a tool that matches with going about your daily life and keeping safe and informed.
And if I may just add here, I think the important thing is that we don't rely solely on this tool. This tool is an addition to a lot of other measures that we have. And none of these measures are perfect. And this tool is not going to catch everything. It's not perfect neither, but it covers a lot of other gaps that we have. And as we're layering these different tools one on top of another, this is where we can reach a higher degree of effectiveness in countering the progression of the virus. So that's why this is so important. There's no other way and no other means that we can have the same kind of effect. And that's why this tool is going to be so impactful.
Prime Minister Trudeau, I just have one more question, and that is again about this idea of civic duty. Jean-Francois has touched on it, knowing that Canadians do want to help. I think we have become, in some ways, we feel helpless because there's not a lot we can do day to day in this fight against COVID-19. Just some final words from you, Prime Minister, in terms of what you want to say to Canadians as far as downloading this app, and again, how that can be part of the solution in this fight.
In a global pandemic, it's really easy to feel powerless. It's really easy to feel like you're a victim of something that's happening in the world around you, and you can do very, very little to actually affect the course of the virus. You can try and keep yourself safe, but you know what? Things are going to happen around you regardless of what you do. But this actually goes to counter that. It empowers you. I mean, if you think about it, if you were to test positive, wouldn't you want the people who you may have come into to know that they tested positive? But isn't it nicer to be able to have that happen anonymously and automatically rather than feeling like you have to call them up and say, okay, I tested positive. You have to, I mean, your close family is going to know no matter what. But the person you sat beside at a deli counter, or the person you stood in line behind a little too closely to, or that cousin who was over for a game of catch at distance that ended up coming a little too close. Those sorts of things happen automatically. So it's a tool that actually connects us all together, that monitors the webs of interconnections that we have in society, and allows you to feel like you are making a difference because you are making a difference. So it's something concrete and easy. It sits in the background of your phone. It doesn't drain your battery. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to. It won't trigger, health calling you. It just encourages you to call up health services if you were notified. It's empowerment, it's private, and it's something that we can all do to keep ourselves safe. So I'm really encouraging everyone to continue to do this like we're doing everything else to keep each other safe.
Excellent. Thank you to both of you. And I do want to say, as someone who's spent 20 years in the technology space, I downloaded this app as soon as it came out, and I encourage everybody as well to download the app. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions on social media. Prime Minister Trudeau and Jean-Francois, thank you so much for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, Amber.